right, man. You ready?
Now we have your top five. What do you want to do for a top five? But I'm going to do one first.
I love it. Yeah, we went with card animations, and we should specify that this is just the animation on the card itself. It's not what the card does in the middle of the game. This is a situation where we looked at our cards that we have, and this is our personal top five. Obviously, you know, we don't have every card in Marvel Snap, so there may be some variant out there that's just daggone amazing when it comes to the animation. And
possibly I think we haven't upgraded the variants we have to animated status.
Yeah, one of the.
I can't remember. I'm sure there was at least one variant that I upgraded just to check the animation.
I did the exact same thing, and I'm really curious if we have any crossover. It will actually be pretty amazing, in my opinion, because there are a ton of cards, variants, and animations. Now, some I think stick out that are better than others, but again, this is our personal top five. Go ahead.
I mean, the way I did this, there was one or two that I had in mind right off the bat. And actually, my number one stayed my number one the whole time. But I went through them and looked at them. And at one point, I had like 20-some possibilities.
All right. Well, number five, we are going to be talking about Beta Ray Bill.
He was on my list at one point.
I'm really surprised. Yeah, I mean, just it's the base card, no variant. And I knew when I got the card that the animation, if they fail to animate the lightning, it'll be the worst crime ever in Marvel Snap. Because there is
on Reddit, you'll find a lot of nominees for that.
Yeah, I mean, it was lightning is coming out of, I mean, it's basically almost frames the card when you look at it. And when it is animated, it does it justice.
Oh, yes.
It's got to do the card justice. There are my goodness, there's hundreds of cards out there where it's hair flapping in the wind. And you're just like, I mean, sometimes you're even looking at the gun blast and they didn't even animate that. But with Beta Ray Bill, they didn't miss the mark. They knew what needed to happen. They knew that they needed to animate the lightning that was coursing around Stormbringer and the rest of Beta Ray Bill. So, yeah, that's my number five, Beta Ray Bill.
My number five is a relatively new addition. I think I just got her last season. It's a variant. I like the original card. I already had one Spotlight variant of this character, but I got this one. I liked it instantly, and once I animated it up, I just appreciated the detail. It's the Mirage Valkyrie variant.
Okay.
She's on the back of her winged horse. The wings are flapping. Her, I guess it's pigtails, although it's more, the hair is tied back for, ease of fighting, so it seems kind of silly to call them pigtails, but they're flapping. Bridle on the horse is moving.
Nice.
There's some shooting stars in the background. Just, everything that you feel like ought to be moving is moving. Nothing, and it all looks kind of natural. I mean, you stare at it long enough, you're like, okay, that bridle's just bouncing the same way. But just looking at it, I mean, I don't think you're supposed to stare at these for a long, long period of time. But just there's a good sense of motion. There's some cards where it's like, okay, that looks cool, but why isn't that moving? And they just got the right balance here.
Right. Yeah.
Especially the wings. It looks, and the hair bouncing, it looks like it should be moving.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
everything that should be moving is moving.
There was a marked point where her
skirt's not moving, but the wings were moving. Even the parts that aren't moving look like they're in motion.
There was a marked point where I started to realize that the animations started to get an uptick finally, because I would always animate a card and I'd just be like, oh my gosh, this is lame. And that was pretty consistent for quite a while. And then finally, the one thing that made me notice that, okay, they may be kicking things up was I think a Dan Hip. Oh my goodness. What's the name of the cat? Help me. Yeah. A Dan Hip goose. And I was like, look at the tail was going insane. I was like, this is like the most animated I'd ever seen. So then I started to pay attention and I started to realize that, yeah, it seemed like they were kicking up their animation game. So yeah, I mean, just like you said, you could see some of the later cards are probably going to represent the animation a little bit better than what we used to get in the beginning of things. So, but yeah, good pick.
I hadn't checked the artist on this. I'm pretty sure this wasn't an exclusive design for Snap, because it's drawn by Phil Noto. I don't know if you know Phil Noto. He's done a lot of X-Men stuff lately, and his art's so good that even the stories that aren't that great are nice to look at.
Oh, those are always fun. I'm appreciative of that.
He's got this awesome combination. Like, it's not simple, but it looks simple and really detailed at the same time.
Okay. That's good.
He actually drew a lot of the Cable series that focused on teenage Cable.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there's some time travel wackiness in that. You'd probably appreciate that one. Excellent base art, good animation. Like I said, even the parts that aren't animated look animated because there's so much motion on the card.
All right.
My number 4, let me pull up the list again. It's actually a card that you talked about that you unlocked this time. I've had it for a little longer, and I hadn't really taken a good look at it because it's not one of the subsets that usually interests me. But once I did, that Squirrel Girl Baby variant made number 4 on my list.
Okay, so I don't have it animated. What happens in it?
Okay, so Doreen and the squirrel she's communicating with, both their tails are moving. But what really, it was the animation in the foreground and the background that got me. There are leaves blowing in the back, and it's not just like vibrating back and forth. I mean, I'm sure it repeats it at some point, but it's not like just this obviously repeating pattern.
Right. Most animations you see on these cards are exactly what you're talking about when it comes to repetitious, like, okay, it moves up and then it moves down and then it moves up and then it moves down. And that, yeah.
Now that I look at these two leaves that I'm really paying attention, they are the same. It goes all the way through and it's moving slow enough and spaced far enough apart that you have to look for the pattern. It's simple, but it's just the speed and everything. It just looks a lot more immersive than some of the others. There's the space in the background and just these well-defined leaves moving through it, and then the tails in the foreground. And a lot of the baby ones, some are funny, but just not my cup of tea. Nothing against Scotty Young, awesome artist, but not usually the ones that I pick to use. But I was just looking at that one. Even the branch they're on is kind of moving up and down. It's just so well balanced, and I mean, it looks like a whole moving scene, not just a card with a couple elements highlighted with motion here and there.
Very nice. All right, my number 4, and that is 1602 Cloak.
Oh yeah.
So
Base Cloak was on my list for a while.
Yeah, do you have 1602 Cloak?
I don't have the 1602 variant.
So let me tell you what sets it over the top. I mean, first off, obviously, the reason why you're picking Cloak is because it's freaking Cloak. And that's what, as much motion as they put in the comics, or what's the best way to perceived motion that they put in the comics, as much motion as they imply in the comics, that Cloak floats around just like Spawn's cape or Batman's cape. You want to see it move. And that's what they realized they needed to do with Cloak. They're like, oh my gosh, I mean, you animate Cloak's Cloak. What puts 1602 Cloak over the top is the fact that, okay, if you look at the 1602 Cloak, it's him coming at you. So the Cloak is moving, clearly. That's number one. You see it kind of floating in the breeze. But the eyes, his eyes pulsate. Like they get brighter. They're yellow and they get brighter and dimmer, which adds this like tiny bit of flair to it that really makes me go, okay, if I'm picking Cloak, which I think deserves to be on my list, I've got to go with the 1602 Cloak just because of the way that, I mean, it's pretty intimidating. It's pretty scary looking. So I liked it. All right.
Nice.
I've got number 3. I'm mixing it
up.
Okay. I go to number 3. I forget how we do the snake thing. So, okay, I did 4. Now my number 3 is Pixel Luke Cage.
Oh, nice.
Very simple. Very, very understated. All it is Luke Cage, pixel form, in his yellow shirt, intimidating. Nothing is moving. Nothing appears to be moving on him. Yeah, he's not moving at all. The only thing that is moving on him is the smoke that is emanating from the bullet holes in his torso. It's really cool. And it's funny because sometimes these things are so subtle. As you're putting a deck together, you grab a card and you're looking at it and you're like, oh, what is animated here? I mean, it does kind of look like there's clouds moving in the background or shadows of clouds on the ground. But really, it's all about the smoke just kind of rising, pixelated from those bullet holes. So, Pixel Luke Cage. How about your number 3?
For I wanted to put a pixel on here because they do a great job of suggesting more motion than you would expect in the pixels. But ultimately, I couldn't really find one that stood out as much from there were several that did it well and several that didn't have much motion. My number 3 was one that I hadn't really paid as much attention to until I started looking at this. One of 2 base cards on my list, and that's Debris.
Okay. All right. I think I had her at one point.
There is a lot going on that. more than even I noticed. Debris, I think her power is mainly telekinetic, but she, tosses debris around. And there are boards, there's a cinder block, there's a can, there's a trash can, there's dust, and I don't think there's a piece of debris on the card that's not moving. So it's all moving, and debris herself is moving. Like, you don't notice that at first, but like it's almost like she's breathing. Her arms are moving, her hair is moving up off her body. Like, you can see space between her hair and her shoulders, and then it closes again. And like, the whole card's in motion. And what's cool is that even if this was a still image, it implies this chaos and all this stuff moving around her constantly. But they don't have fast animation on here. But even with this calm motion, repetitive, it's not moving across the card or anything, like it's just moving back and forth. But all this motion, even at that speed, implies that chaos that it does when it's still, even while it's moving, if that makes any sense.
No, that does.
Like, it's this slow, repetitive motion that would be peaceful, but the way they've designed it, it implies the chaos that is swirling.
All right, then what's your number 2?
Number 2 is the other base card on here. Again, one that I've looked at this card a bunch. I only have one variant of it, and it's a chibi, so I don't use that very often.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the less creepy chibis, but again, just once I started looking at it closely, it combines some elements that I liked in other cards, and that's the base card for Super Scroll.
Oh, yeah, almost. Actually, I think it might have been a runner-up for me. No, it was not. But I looked it up.
Do you have any Fantastic Four members on your list?
Not on. Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, I do. But it's not Reed Richards.
Okay. All right. Well, there were 2 Fantastic Four ones that were in the running for me. But there's an element on a lot of cards, whether it's Fantastic Four or not. A lot of the places they put motion is in the flames.
Oh, boy.
And Super Scroll he's got, torch flame coming out. So he's got that. He's got the stretchy arm like Reed Richards that made the ink pulp Mr. Fantastic.
That is one of my runners up too. I had Mr. Fantastic on there.
Yeah, but Super Scroll's got both those elements.
Yeah.
And then, kind of the light of distant galaxy reflecting in the background. And so, yeah, I was looking at cards with cool flames and stretchy arms, and I'm like, wait a minute, I got them both right here in Super Scroll.
Right. Yeah, that's good stuff. I was looking over Super Scroll, and it was shortly after, I think, or maybe it was after I was looking at the ink pulp Mr. Fantastic. And I was like, well, if I can't put ink pulp Mr. Fantastic on the list, I'm not putting Super Scroll, because even though all of that is both of it's on there, Mr. Fantastic, that ink pulp variant, when it's animated, it looks great with his wiggly arms. I like it.
But I was like, he's got Super Scroll's got the best of both worlds. So at least this one time, Super Scroll beats the Fantastic Four in my list. Anyway.
I like it. All right, so my number 2 is another Pixel, and I've talked about this Pixel on here before. This is Pixel Wolverine.
Yes.
And it's very simple. When you look at the card, I was just looking over to see what all was animated on it. The background, there's some trees, and it looks like the wind's blowing and the trees are blowing back and forth. So that's about the extent of the background that's animated. But what really stands out is his claws. And you mentioned the glint off of Luke Cage's tiara. This is the exact same thing. It's the glint off of Wolverine's claws. And the thing is that I didn't notice it when you bring up the card to look at it. It really stands out for some reason when the card is like, I don't want to say miniaturized, but that's probably the best way to put it. It's a smaller version of the card when you're looking at a deck as a whole. And then when you look at the card as it sits there and animates, you could really see the glint on the claws then. And that's what first brought me to it, was when I was like, oh my gosh, that those claws actually stand out, and it looks like, and it absolutely reminds me of the X-Men video games. It's a Pixel Wolverine. His claws are out, and of course they always wanted to animate that. Schnicked. You can almost hear it. But anyway, that is my number 2, and I think it's just because it captures the essence of the 16-bit era, and it also is a Marvel Snap card, and it looks pretty cool. So, all right, then I'll do my number 1 here.
I think I may have ruined your number 1.
I mean, hey, you said there's plenty of Human Torch cards out there. Do you want to guess which one it is?
Well, just because this one was in my top 5 for a while, if it's the one I'm thinking of.
It's the number one for quite a while.
It just, is it the In-Hyuk Lee variant?
Yes, it is. The variant of, and we all got that one, didn't we? Wasn't that one of the ones that everybody got at one point? Mm-hmm. And it was, I was like, okay, this variant looks cool. It's a close up of his face. Yeah, whatever. And I mean, Lee is a great artist. I was impressed with the variant that he did. And then it became animated and it actually looks like he is on fire.
Yes.
I mean, that is a perfect animation to make you think that card is alive. It other stuff you can kind of pick apart, but that one for some reason just really stood out to me. Like they knew how to make it look. Not only is there the fire effect that's going on, but when you look it over, it's kind of got this like almost wavy heat feel too. Not only that, but I'm looking at the animation right now, like his face is changing color.
Oh yeah.
His face goes to a bright red and then to a real dark red. It's just, it sets this thing over the top. It is what the Human Torch, if you can animate some of these people's art, that's what really made me excited to be like, oh, bring back let's see some Liefeld stuff. I looked over how they animated McFarlane's black costume Spider-Man, and I wanted to include it, but the only thing really that's animated on that thing is the webbing is like different. It kind of glints like Wolverine's claws. And I was just like, whatever. He had red spiders all over him. Animate those.
Yeah.
That would have been awesome. But I want to see some of this older art. If they can do this with In-Hyuk Lee and make it look like this, bring some older art back, let's see some Jim Lee stuff, which they've been doing that plenty of times. I want to see that stuff kind of animated. I want to see what they can do with that. Human Torch, number one for me on this list. So tell me about your number one.
Now mine, in some ways, the animation's not as impressive as some of the others, but it stands out because it's unique. Like all the things I liked about these, I could see elements in others, but the one that ended up being my favorite pretty much from the start and nothing to throw at it is the Chris Samnee Captain America.
I don't know if I've seen that.
Chris Samnee did a lot of work with Mark Waid, drew Daredevil with Mark Waid, Black Widow, which opened up with a scene where she's escaping from a crashing helicarrier that definitely influenced the movie. But there's a Chris Samnee Captain America, and it's very retro looking, very clean. It looks a little more modern. But Cap's not really moving. There's not a whole lot in the picture itself that's moving, but it's got this grainy film quality with the lines. It looks like a color newsreel.
Okay.
Film, and it screams retro Captain America.
Yeah, I see it now. Man, that does look awesome.
Nothing's moving in it except the screen elements, and then if you move the card around, you can see the background. But that effect, it even though it's not moving, it feels like you're watching like an old newsreel or an old film on a projector that's seen better days. It totally fits that Captain America retro vibe. And as much as I liked a lot of these, and there may be some more dynamic animations, it's the only one like it. And everything I went through, I'm like, okay, here's my top 5. Can anything knock it out? And no, I changed the 2, 3, 4, and 5. They moved around a lot, but that was the first one I thought of, and nothing changed my mind.
Before you animated it, did it have that on there?
I don't think so.
That's awesome. Imagine that.
I honestly don't remember. It's been a while since I'd animated it. It's my favorite Captain America variant because, now you know me, I've said when we've talked comics, I appreciate the artist's talent, but I'm more drawn to the writing. I'm able to write some, and I'm not able to draw very much at all. He's made so many good comics with Mark Waid that I look at this and I think Mark Waid is one of my favorite writers. The animation quality reinforces and underscores the idea of Captain America.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what this does.
That's a good pick. I think what bothers me the most, though, about the video you sent is how you have 505 credits.
Oh, it's driving me insane. It's when they rounded down, or they fix the fast upgrade to where it's all even numbers. And I'm like, I've still got these 5 credits and I can't get rid of them.
They're not ever going to go anywhere.
I mean, like there were times when I would upgrade cards or do fast upgrades just so I could get it to a round number. And I can do nothing with those 5 credits. Forget nerfing cards. Second dinner, take these 5 credits from me. Or give me 95, but I'm not trying to be greedy.
All right. That's good stuff. Well, there we go, man. We did it. That was our top 5 card animations. So I know you all probably have your own top 5 out there. We'd love to hear what your top 5 is. Send us a video, Snap Material, at Snap Material on X/Twitter, whatever you want to call it. We'd love to see what your top 5 favorite card animations are.
And remember, it's your top 5 and our top 5. There's literally no way anybody can be wrong about this.
That's right.
So just cards you think are cool, and don't say, hey, Evan, your Captain America card sucks.
All right, man. I think we did it. We have went through and talked some Marvel Snap tonight. Let's go ahead and get into plugs. What do you have going on over there at *51? And I think you were recently on a podcast that I think as of last night, as far as when we were recording here. Yeah. So plug them, man.
I like to plot around. Well, at *51.blogspot.com, I really am reading the Amalgam comics, but life and shiny objects keep slowing me down. It's probably going to be my thoughts on the original Godzilla movies, with and without Raymond Burr. But then coming up soon, I'll have a rather problematic Amalgam issue.
Oh, boy.
Not because of what was in the issue, but because of who co-wrote it.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, I read it. It was less fun because of who wrote it. Or who co-wrote it. Mark Waid wrote the other part of it. You can read about that, Amalgam Comics, the complete run of NFL Super Pro, all the ins and outs of Marvel's foremost NFL licensed superhero, who did team up with Captain America at one point.
Right.
I also got a look at other movies that you can find at Dollar Tree. #Dollar Tree Cinema, #Free Comic Friday. I looked through the free comic book titles of today and yesteryear. And then just whatever other weirdness I happen to discover, including a deeper dive than you got in my ramblings tonight on Thor number 290 and Eternals Annual number 1 starring Thena, Carcass, and Reject. And yes, when they eventually get around to Eternals Series 2, I need El Vampiro, probably be the season pass card, and I need Carcass and Reject.
Absolutely.
And then you're probably not going to get Tomorrow Hawk.
Dang it.
Probably better that he stay in the back issue bins, but give me those 3 cards, and you know what the heck? Let's give Oneg the Prober.
Oh, do it.
Maybe just test him out a little.
Yeah, there ain't no reason not to. I mean, come on. Well, as for myself, this should be airing next week, I would assume. So, hey, if you get a chance, give a listen to me, Darian Dean talking Legion Quest, a lead into Age of Apocalypse, and then that aired this past Monday.
Did you pick that solely because of Legion and Marvel Snap?
I wish I could say it was me. It was not me that picked that. My goodness, I had to refrain from talking about Legion and Marvel Snap on that podcast. And then shortly after that,
you went back in time and turned everything into Israel in the 70s.
It was crazy.
So, go ahead with your plugs.
Well, the other thing was this past Thursday dropped an old episode of Source Material where me, Gavin Napier, and Josh Calandros got together and talked about all of the Age of Apocalypse. And nice. It's very, very, very truncated, where we just essentially talked about each book and the story that happened. So don't expect a very, very big deep dive into it, but you can hear us talk about that. It's a syndicated source material from, like I said, 2016. I thought it would be a good follow-up for Legion Quest. And then next week you should be able...
How much time would you say you devoted to Wolverine popping the other set of claws?
Not a whole lot on that one.
Go ahead.
No, you're fine. This coming Monday, you should be able to hear me and Mark Radulich wrap up our discussion on Lois Lane, Enemy of the People. She's a journalist, Evan Bevins.
Yeah, I did know that. Actually, Mark made reference to that in the podcast that you set me up to plug, and I just did an episode of Comic Stripped comparing Bulletproof Monk, the comic, to Bulletproof Monk, the movie.
I tuned in for a little bit last night, just for a real small snippet before I went to bed, and I heard you guys talking about Mark and you talking about how, just vastly different they made the movie versus the comic. Sounds like there was only a few elements of the comic that survived going into the movie.
Title and a character named Carr. That's it.
I've never read either. Right,
that's a good question.
Okay, who published the book?
Image, actually.
Was it
Michael Avon Oeming, the guy that did Powers with Brian Michael Bendis?
Yeah, that's right. I heard you mention Powers.
He drew it, and then one guy wrote the first issue and part of the second issue, and then another guy finished the second issue or wrote part of it and wrote the third issue. And then there was another dude who was like the story editor over all of it. And at some point, John Woo was like, hey, this will make a cool movie, but only...
It'd be about a tenth of it, maybe less. 5% of this is making it in there. Well,
maybe.
I'll be listening to that here pretty soon.
They cut out the talking dog that never actually spoke in the comic. If a dog talks in a comic and there's no word balloons to illustrate it, does it make a sound?
Does it make a sound? That's a good question. Our third installment of that's coming up on Monday the 10th, and you actually get to hear a return of the gag reel, or me and Mark Rattlish. Mark has always given me a hard time because the gag reel is something that he loves, and I haven't been putting in there because we'll record for like an hour and a half. I'll split it into 3 shows, and it's like, okay, I could put a gag reel on for about a minute because there's only about a minute worth of funny things that we've said. So check that out. That's coming up the 10th, and then... I think that, you can hear, me and you and Chris are going to be recording tomorrow. We also have our X-Men Adventure show, which is on, it's already uploaded. I think that should drop July 1st. Probably should have, I wish I would have been smart and dropped it when X-Men 97 ended, but didn't do that. But yeah, keep an eye out for that. And I think that's it. When we talk, we're going to be talking X-Men 2099 number 1.
Mm-hmm. And Heroes for Hire number 1.
And Heroes for Hire number 1. So, that will be happening tomorrow. So with that being said, we're getting out of here. That's Evan Bevins. I'm Jesse Starcher. Thanks for joining us for Snap Material. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.